Welcome back to our weekly NFL recap video, in which today we will be covering week 2 of the 2025-2026 NFL season. If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate all the support as we are trying to get to 1,200 subscribers. Today we will be covering all 16 games for all 32 teams in the NFL, and let's first start it off with the Thursday night matchup between the Washington Commanders and the Green Bay Packers. In this Thursday night football game, we had the Packers take on the Commanders, in which the Packers beat the Commanders 27-18. The Packers are 2-0 to start off the year, and the Commanders are 1-1. Jaden Daniels went 24 for 42 with 200 yards and 2 interceptions. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, Austin Eckler, and Jaden Daniels all had 17 yards rushing on the day, while Zach Ertz led the team in receiving with 64 yards and a touchdown. Deebo Samuels had 7 receptions for 44 yards and a touchdown on the day. For the Green Bay Packers, Jordan Love went 19 for 31, 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Jacobs led the team in rushing with 23 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft led the team in receiving with 124 yards and a touchdown, while Romeo Doubs also had 3 receptions for 28 yards and a touchdown on the day. The scoring was opened up with the Packers scoring a touchdown on their second drive, followed up by another Packers touchdown in the second quarter. The Commanders then scored a field goal, and in the final 2 drives, each team missed a field goal, with the score being 14-3 in favor of the Packers heading into halftime. On the first drive of the second half, the Green Bay Packers scored a field goal, pushing their lead up to 17. The Commanders then scored a touchdown to make it 10-17, followed up by a Packers touchdown to make it 24-10, and then followed up by another Packers field goal to make it 27-10. The Commanders then scored a touchdown with a 2-point conversion, and the Packers held on to the final score of 27-18. And it looks like Jaden Daniels was hurt throughout the game and is questionable going into next week. The next game of the week was between the Los Angeles Rams and the Tennessee Titans, in which the Rams beat the Titans 33-19. The Rams are 2-0 to start off the year, while the Titans fall to 0-2. Matthew Stafford went 23 for 33 for 298 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Kyron Williams led the team in rushing with 17 carries for 66 yards, while Puka Nacua had 1 carry rushing for 45 yards and a touchdown. Blake Corum also had 5 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown on the day. Devontae Adams led the team in receiving with 6 receptions for 106 yards and a touchdown, while Davis Allen also had 1 reception for 8 yards and 1 touchdown. For the Titans, Cam Ward went 19 for 33 with 175 yards and a touchdown. Tony Pollard led the team in rushing with 20 carries for 92 yards, while Calvin Ridley led the team in receiving with 3 receptions for 57 yards. Elick Ayomanor had 4 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown, while Cam Ward had a fumble on the day as well. The first points were scored by the Rams on their first drive in the first quarter, taking a 7-0 lead. The Titans would then score a field goal in the second quarter to make it 7-3, which was then followed up by a Rams field goal to make it 10-3. The Titans then scored a touchdown to make it 10-10, and then to end off the first half, the Titans scored a field goal to take a 13-10 lead over the Rams. The Rams got the ball to start off the second half, scored a field goal to tie it up at 13. Titans then scored a field goal to make it 16-13. The Rams then scored a touchdown and got the extra point to make it 22-16. The Rams would then score a touchdown in the fourth quarter to make it 27-16, and then another touchdown to make it 33-16. The Titans would score 1 more field goal to give us the final score of 33-19. The next game of the week was a rematch of last year's Super Bowl 59, and just like in Super Bowl 59, the Eagles beat the Chiefs 22-17. The Eagles are 2-0 to start off the year, while the Chiefs fall to 0-2 for the first time under Mahomes. Jalen Hurts went 15 for 22 for 101 yards. Saquon Barkley led the team in rushing with 22 carries for 88 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Hurts also had 9 carries rushing for 15 yards and a touchdown. Devonta Smith led the team in receiving with 4 receptions for 53 yards. And Patrick Mahomes went 16 for 29 with 187 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Patrick Mahomes led the team in rushing with 7 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown. Travis Kelce led the team in receiving with 61 yards, while Tyquan Thornton had 2 receptions for 59 yards and a touchdown on the day. The first points of the game were scored by a Eagles touchdown in the first quarter as they took a 7-0 lead. Harrison Butker missed a field goal in the first quarter, but in the second quarter, the Chiefs scored a field goal and then a touchdown. And on the final drive, the Eagles scored a field goal to tie it up at 10 heading into halftime to open up the first half. The second half, the Chiefs on their first drive went over on downs, in which the Eagles capitalized with a field goal to take a 13-10 lead. And in the red zone, Travis Kelce bobbled the ball as it fell into Andrew Mukuba, and then the Eagles scored a touchdown to make it 20-10. And on their final drive, the Chiefs scored a touchdown, but the Eagles were able to chew out the clock and win 22-17. The next game of the week was between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Cincinnati Bengals, in which the Bengals beat the Jaguars 31-27. The Bengals are 2-0, while the Jaguars are 1-1 to start off the year. Trevor Lawrence went 24 for 42 with 271 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Travis Etienne Jr. led the team in rushing with 14 carries for 71 yards, while Parker Washington led the team in receiving with 5 receptions for 76 yards. De'Ami Brown had 5 receptions for 57 yards and a touchdown. Bashal Tutin had 2 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown, while Travis Etienne also had 2 receptions for 18 yards and a touchdown on the day. Joe Burrow went 7 for 13 for 76 yards and a touchdown before he got hurt, and he has turf toe and will likely be out for about 3 months as his injury requires surgery. Jake Browning then took over, going 21 for 32 for 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Chase Brown led the team in rushing with 16 carries for 47 yards, while Jake Browning had 1 rushing carry for 1 yard and a touchdown. Jamar Chase led the team in receiving with 14 receptions for 165 yards and a touchdown on the day. T. Higgins also had 3 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown, while Mitchell Tinsley had 1 reception for 13 yards and a touchdown on the day. The first points of the game were scored on the opening drive by the Jaguars as they took a 7-0 lead. In the first quarter, the Bengals then responded with a touchdown of their own, tying it up at 7-7. The Jaguars then scored a touchdown to make it 14-7, which was then followed up by a Bengals field goal, a Jaguars field goal, and heading into halftime, the Jaguars led Cincinnati 17-10. The Bengals got the ball to start off the third quarter, tied it up with a touchdown on the opening drive, which was then followed up by a Jaguars touchdown and then a Bengals touchdown heading into the fourth quarter when it was tied up at 24 apiece. The Jaguars then scored a field goal, and then the Bengals scored a final touchdown as they stopped the Jaguars on the final drive as well, giving us the final score of 31-27. The next game of the week was a NFC East divisional matchup between the New York Giants and the Dallas Cowboys, in which the Dallas Cowboys beat the Giants 40-37 in overtime. The Giants fall to 0-2, while the Cowboys are 1-1 to start off the year. Russell Wilson went 30 for 41 with 450 yards, 3 touchdowns to 1 interceptions. Cam Skattebo led the team in rushing with 11 carries for 45 yards and a touchdown. Malik Neighbors led the team in receiving with 9 receptions for 167 yards, 2 touchdowns. Wan'Dale Robinson had 8 receptions for 142 yards and a touchdown on the day. Dak Prescott went 38 for 52 for 361 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Javonte Williams led the team in rushing with 18 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown, while Miles Sanders had 5 carries for 15 yards and a touchdown on the day. CeeDee Lamb led the team in receptions with 112 yards, while George Pickens had 5 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown. Kayvontae Turpin also had 4 receptions for 47 yards and a touchdown on the day. The first points of the game were scored by the Giants with a field goal, 2 in the first quarter as they took a 6-0 lead. Cowboys then answered with a field goal, followed up by a touchdown by the Giants and Cowboys, giving us a 13-10 score, with the Giants leading heading into halftime. The Cowboys then scored a touchdown in the third quarter, followed up by a Giants field goal, which gave us the score of 17-16, with Dallas in the lead. To start off the fourth quarter, the Cowboys scored a field goal, taking a 20-16 lead, followed up by plenty of touchdowns. Giants scored a touchdown, Cowboys scored a touchdown, Giants then scored another one, followed up by another Cowboys touchdown, followed up by another Giants touchdown, which gave us the score of 37-34. And on the final drive, Aubrey kicked a field goal to take us into overtime. And to start off overtime, the Cowboys punted, Giants punted, Cowboys then punted, another pick, and to seal the game up, Aubrey scored another field goal to give the Cowboys a 40-37 victory over the Giants. Next game of the week was a NFC North divisional matchup between Ben Johnson against his former team and Dan Campbell. The Detroit Lions got the victory, beating the Bears 52-21. The Bears are 0-2 to start off the year, while the Lions are 1-1. Caleb Williams went 19 for 30 with 207 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, while Tyson Bagent went 2 for 3 for 27 yards. DeAndre Swift led the team in rushing with 12 carries for 63 yards and a touchdown, while Rome Odunze led the team in receiving with 7 receptions for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. DeAndre Swift lost 1 fumble on the day as well. For the Lions, Jared Goff went 23 for 28, 334 yards and 5 touchdowns. Jahmyr Gibbs led the team in rushing with 12 carries for 94 yards and a touchdown. David Montgomery had 11 carries for 57 yards and a touchdown. Amon-Ra St. Brown had 9 receptions for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. Jameson Williams had 2 receptions for 108 yards and a touchdown, while Brock Wright had 3 receptions for 28 yards and a touchdown on the day. The first points of the game were scored on the opening drive for the Lions. The Bears then responded with a touchdown of their own. Later on in the first quarter, the Lions then scored another touchdown to take a 14-7 lead heading into the second quarter. The Lions then missed a field goal, which was then followed up by a Lions touchdown on the next drive, followed up by a Bears touchdown, and then a Lions touchdown as we headed into halftime, with Detroit having a 28-14 lead over Chicago. In the third quarter, the Lions scored a field goal and then a touchdown on the next drive, having a comfortable 38-14 lead heading into the fourth quarter. They then scored another touchdown to take a 45-14 lead. The Bears then answered with another touchdown, followed up by another Lions touchdown to give us the final score of 52-21. The next game of the week was a AFC East divisional matchup between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins, in which the Patriots beat the Dolphins 33-27. The Patriots are 1-1, while the Dolphins fall to 0-2 to begin the year. Drake May went 19 for 23 with 230 yards and 2 touchdowns. Ramondre Stevenson had 11 carries for 54 yards, while Drake May had 10 carries for 31 yards and a touchdown. Ramondre Stevenson also led the team in receiving with 5 receptions for 88 yards. Kayshon Boutte had 1 reception for 16 yards and a touchdown. Mac Hollins had 1 reception for 8 yards and a touchdown on the day. Tua Tagovailoa went 26 for 32 with 315 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interceptions. Devon Achane led the team in rushing with 11 carries for 30 yards. Tyreek Hill led the team in receiving with 6 receptions and 109 yards. Devon Achane had 8 receptions for 92 yards and a touchdown. Jalen Waddle also had 5 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown on the day. The first points of the game were scored by the Patriots on their opening drive as they led 6-0, and they were not able to get the extra point. The Patriots then scored another touchdown in the first quarter and did not get another extra point as they led 12-7. In the second quarter, the Dolphins scored a touchdown, followed by a Patriots field goal and a Miami Dolphins touchdown as well, as the score was in favor of New England 15-14 heading into halftime. The Dolphins then scored a field goal to open up the second half, another field goal, which was then followed up by a Patriots touchdown as the Patriots took a 23-20 lead heading into the fourth quarter. Later on in the fourth quarter, the Patriots would score a touchdown and a field goal as they won with a final score of 33-27, and things are not looking good in the Dolphins organization as the coach, quarterback, and things on the field are in disarray. It'll be interesting to see whether they rally or whether everything falls apart. The next game of the week was between the San Francisco 49ers and the New Orleans Saints. The 49ers beat the Saints 26-21. The Niners are 2-0 to start off the year, while the Saints fall to 0-2. Mac Jones went 26 for 39 with 279 yards and 3 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey led the team in rushing with 13 carries and 55 yards, while Jawan Jennings led the team in receiving with 5 receptions, 89 yards, and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey had 6 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown, while Luke Farrell had 2 receptions for 15 yards and a touchdown on the day. Spencer Rattler went 25 for 34 with 207 yards and 3 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara led the team in rushing with 21 carries for 99 yards. Chris Olave led the team in receiving with 6 receptions for 54 yards. Rashid Shaheed had 4 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown. Jawan Johnson had 5 receptions for 49 yards and a touchdown. And Devon Vele had 1 reception for 3 yards and a touchdown on the day. To open up the scoring, the Niners scored a touchdown to take a 6-0 lead. Heading into the second quarter, the Saints had missed a field goal prior. The 49ers then scored a field goal in the second quarter, followed up by a Saints touchdown and then a 49ers touchdown as the Niners took a 16-7 lead heading into halftime. In the first drive of the second half, the Saints scored a touchdown to make it 16-14, which was then followed up by a 49ers field goal as they took a 19-14 lead heading into the fourth quarter. The Niners then scored a touchdown, followed up by a Saints touchdown, which gave us the final score of 26-21 as the 49ers held on. The next game of the week was a AFC East divisional matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets, in which the Bills beat the Jets 30-10. Bills are 2-0 to start off the year, while the Jets are 0-2. Josh Allen went 14 for 25 for 148 yards. Mitch Trubisky also went 1 for 2 for 32 yards. James Cook led the team in rushing with 21 carries for 132 yards and 2 touchdowns. Elijah Moore had 2 carries for 6 yards and a touchdown on the day for the Bills, while Tyrod Taylor went 7 for 11 for 56 yards and a touchdown. Justin Fields went 3 for 11 for 27 yards. Justin Fields led the team in rushing with 5 carries for 49 yards. Garrett Wilson led the team in receiving with 4 receptions for 50 yards, while Jeremy Ruckert had 1 reception for 5 yards and a touchdown on the day. To open up the scoring, the Bills scored a touchdown on their opening drive, followed up by a field goal as they took a 10-0 lead heading into the second quarter. The Bills then scored a field goal and then a touchdown to take a 20-0 lead. The Jets then scored a field goal as heading into halftime Buffalo led 20-3. Buffalo would then score a field goal to start off the third quarter, taking a 23-3 lead, then scoring a touchdown, taking a 30-3 lead over the Jets. Jets would muster up 1 touchdown, but gave us the final score of 30-10 with the Bills getting the victory. The next game of the week was a AFC and NFC matchup between the Seattle Seahawks and the Pittsburgh Steelers, in which the Seahawks beat the Steelers 31-17. Both teams are 1-1 to start off the year. Sam Darnold went 22 for 33 with 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Kenneth Walker led the team in rushing with 13 carries for 105 yards and a touchdown, while Jackson Smith-Njigba led the team in receiving with 8 receptions and 103 yards. Torrey Horton had 2 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown, while A.J. Barner had 2 receptions for 26 yards and a touchdown on the day. Aaron Rodgers went 18 for 33 with 203 yards, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions. Mason Rudolph also went 2 for 2 for 12 yards. Jaylen Warren led the team in rushing with 14 carries for 48 yards, and he also led the team in receiving with 4 receptions for 86 yards. DK Metcalf had 3 receptions for 20 yards and a touchdown on the day. To open up the scoring, the Seahawks scored a touchdown on their opening drive, followed up by 2 Steelers field goal as we headed into the second quarter, with the Seahawks leading 7-6. The Seahawks would then miss a field goal. Steelers would then score a touchdown and lead 14-7 heading into halftime. In the third quarter, the Seahawks scored a touchdown to tie it up at 14 as we headed into the fourth quarter, as the Seahawks scored a field goal and had a fumble return touchdown as they led 24-14. The Steelers would then score a field goal to make it 24-17. The Seahawks would then score another touchdown to give us the final score of 31-17. The next game of the week was a AFC North divisional matchup between the Baltimore Ravens and the Cleveland Browns. The Ravens beat the Browns 41-17. The Ravens are 1-1, while the Browns fall to 0-2 to start off the year. Joe Flacco went 25 for 45 with 199 yards, 1 touchdown, and an interception. Dylan Gabriel went 3 for 3 for 19 yards and a touchdown on the day. Quinshon Judkins led the team in rushing with 10 receptions for 61 yards. Jerry Jeudy led the team in receiving with 4 receptions for 51 yards. Cedric Tillman had 2 receptions for 22 yards and a touchdown. Dylan Sampson had 3 receptions for 13 yards and a touchdown on the day. Flacco also lost a fumble on the day. Lamar Jackson went 19 for 29 for 225 yards and 4 touchdowns. Derrick Henry led the team in rushing with 11 carries for 23 yards. Zay Flowers led the team in receiving with 7 receptions for 75 yards. DeAndre Hopkins had 2 receptions for 64 yards and a touchdown. Devontae Walker had 2 receptions for 26 yards and 2 touchdowns, while Tylan Wallace had 2 receptions for 25 yards and a touchdown on the day. To open up the scoring, the Ravens scored a field goal in the first quarter, then scored a touchdown in the second quarter, which was then followed up by a Browns field goal and towards the end of the first half as we headed into halftime with Baltimore leading 10-3. Ravens then scored a field goal followed up by a touchdown, which was followed up by a Browns touchdown as we headed into the fourth quarter with Baltimore leading 20-10. The Ravens then scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter to take a 27-10 lead. The Browns would then fumble, and the Ravens would take a 34-10 lead, while the Ravens capped it off with another touchdown to make it 41-10. The Browns would then score one more touchdown to give us the final score of 41-17. The next game of the week was a AFC matchup between the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos, in which the Colts beat the Broncos 29-28. The Colts are 2-0, while the Denver Broncos fall to 1-1 to start off the year. Bo Nix went 22 for 30 with 206 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. J.K. Dobbins led the team in rushing with 14 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown. Troy Franklin led the team in receiving with 8 receptions for 89 yards and a touchdown. Marvin Mims had 2 receptions for 24 yards and a touchdown, while Adam Troutman had 3 receptions for 10 yards and a touchdown on the day. Daniel Jones went 23 for 34, 316 yards and a touchdown. Jonathan Taylor led the team in rushing with 25 carries for 165 yards. Daniel Jones had 6 carries for 2 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Warren led the team in receiving with 4 receptions for 79 yards. Jonathan Taylor had 2 receptions for 50 yards and a touchdown on the day. as well. To open up the scoring, the Colts scored a field goal, followed up by a Broncos touchdown. Colts then scored another field goal. Heading into the second quarter, the Broncos led 7-6, which was then followed up by a Colts touchdown, Broncos touchdown, as the score was 14-13. The Broncos would then score another touchdown. Colts would then score another touchdown as the Broncos led 21-20 heading into halftime. To open up the second half, the Broncos then scored a touchdown to take a 28-20 lead, followed up by a Colts field goal in the third quarter to make it 28-23. In the fourth quarter, the Colts then scored a field goal to make it 28-26. Broncos would then miss a field goal, and initially the Colts kicker missed the field goal, but a penalty then allowed a re-kick as time expired, as the Colts beat the Broncos 29-28. The next game of the week was a NFC conference matchup between the Arizona Cardinals and the Carolina Panthers, in which the Cardinals beat the Panthers 27-22. Panthers are 0-2, while the Cardinals are 2-0 to start off the year. Bryce Young went 35 for 55 with 328 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Chuba Hubbard led the team in rushing with 10 carries for 38 yards. Tetro McMillan led the team in receiving with 6 receptions for 100 yards. Hunter Renfrow had 7 receptions for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns. Chuba Hubbard also had 5 receptions for 39 yards and a touchdown, while Bryce Young lost a fumble on the day. Kyler Murray went 17 for 25 for 220 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. James Conner went 11 carries for 34 yards and a touchdown on the day. Trey McBride led the team in receiving with 6 receptions for 78 yards, while Michael Wilson had 1 reception for 11 yards and 1 touchdown. To open up the scoring, the Cardinals scored a field goal and a pick 6 as well, and it was responded by a Panthers field goal as we headed into the second quarter, with the Cardinals leading 10-3. Cardinals would then score a field goal and a touchdown heading into halftime, with the Cardinals leading 20-3. The Cardinals would then score a touchdown to make it 27-3. Panthers would then respond with a touchdown to make it 27-9. The Panthers would then score 2 consecutive touchdowns to bring it to 27-22, giving us the final score. The next game of the week was a NFC conference matchup between the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings, giving us Sunday Night Football. The Falcons beat the Vikings 22-6. Both teams are 1-1 to start off the year. Michael Penix Jr. went 13 for 21 with 135 yards. Bijan Robinson led the team in rushing with 22 carries for 143 yards, while Tyler Algier had 16 carries for 76 yards and a touchdown. Drake London led the team in receiving with 3 receptions for 49 yards. He also had a fumble on the day as well. J.J. McCarthy also seemed to have got hurt throughout this game, as he may be sidelined for a couple weeks. He went 11 for 21 with 158 yards and 2 interceptions. Jordan Mason led the team in rushing with 9 carries for 30 yards. Justin Jefferson led the team in receiving with 3 receptions for 81 yards. J.J. McCarthy had 3 fumbles in which they lost 1, and Miles Price also lost a fumble on the day as well. To open up the scoring, the Falcons would score a field goal followed up by another field goal as they took a 6-0 lead into the second quarter. The Vikings would then respond with a field goal, and then the Falcons would score a field goal. Vikings would score a field goal to end the half as Atlanta led 9-6. The Vikings failed to score another point in the game as the Falcons scored a field goal in the third quarter, and in the fourth, a touchdown, and gave us the final score of 22-6. The first of 2 Monday Night Football games was a NFC versus AFC conference matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Houston Texans, in which the Buccaneers beat the Texans 22-19. The Buccaneers are 2-0, while the Texans fall to 0-2 to start off the year. Baker Mayfield went 25 for 38 with 215 yards and 2 touchdowns. Bucky Irving led the team in rushing with 17 carries for 71 yards, while Rashad White had 10 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown. Mike Evans led the team in receiving with 5 receptions for 56 yards, while Emeka Egbuka had 4 receptions for 29 yards and a touchdown. Ryan Miller also had 1 reception for 20 yards and a touchdown on the day. For the Texans, C.J. Stroud went 13 for 24 with 207 yards and a touchdown. Nick Chubb went 12 for 43 and a touchdown. Nico Collins led the team in receiving with 3 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown on the day. To open up the scoring, the Texans scored a touchdown, the Buccaneers scored a touchdown, and the Texans scored a field goal as they led 10-7 in the first quarter. The Buccaneers quickly responded with a touchdown as those were the final points heading into halftime, with the Buccaneers leading 14-10. And in the third quarter, no team scored. Buccaneers missed a field goal in the third quarter. There was a turnover on downs for the Texans in the fourth quarter, a blocked punt for the Buccaneers, which resulted in a Texans field goal, making the score 14-3. The Texans would then score a touchdown, taking a 19-14 lead over the Buccaneers. They failed to get the 2-point conversion, and Baker Mayfield led a drive as the Buccaneers beat the Texans with a final score of 22-19. The final game of the week was the last Monday Night Football game, a AFC West divisional matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas Raiders, in which the Chargers beat the Raiders 20-9. The Chargers are 2-0, while the Raiders are 1-1 to begin the year. Justin Herbert went 19 for 27 for 242 yards and 2 touchdowns. Justin Herbert also led the team in rushing with 9 carries for 31 yards. Quentin Johnston led the team in reception with 3 for 71 yards and a touchdown. Keenan Allen had 5 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown on the day. Geno Smith went 24 for 43 with 183 yards and 0 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. Ashton Jeanty led the team in rushing with 11 attempts for 43 yards. Jacoby Myers led the team in receiving with 6 receptions for 68 yards on the day. To open up the scoring, the Chargers scored a field goal followed up by a Raiders field goal and then a Chargers touchdown as they led 10-3 heading into the second quarter. Raiders then scored a field goal followed up by a Chargers field touchdown as the Chargers led 17-6 heading into halftime, and the only points in the third quarter were from a Cameron Dicker field goal for the Chargers as they led 20-6. Only points in the fourth quarter was a Raiders field goal to make it 20-9, giving us the final score, as that was a poor performance by Geno Smith on the day. The Chargers defense made it very difficult for the Raiders offense to earn any yardage on any drive and made it very difficult for them to try and get it into the end zone as they failed to do so on the day. And that recaps all 16 games for Week 2 in the NFL in this 2025-2026 NFL season. If you like this type of content, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate all the support as we are trying to get to 1,200 subscribers. If you're a fan of the NFL and college football, stay tuned as we'll be covering both all season long. Appreciate all the support, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care.